Hello everyone, and welcome to Weekend Workshops, presented by the Wichita Falls Museum of Art at MSU Texas. In the tradition of makerspaces, we are here to learn the basics of a new medium and make it your own. Today, we will be focused on polymer clays. Despite the name, polymer clays aren't actually a true clay, not in the earthenware sense that you would normally associate with pottery and, historic clays. This is plastic based, and it was originally developed to be an alternative to early plastics such as bakelite. And while polymer clays weren't very successful, at least from a manufacturing standpoint, to replace the more durable plastics like bakelite, they became pretty popular for modeling and, playing. Like, it became a toy and it became a way of creating models. So, as you can see, just from me playing with it on camera, it is very malleable. It's pretty soft. You can buy polymer clays in different softness and different levels of soft and firm. Now, when you first get polymer clays, and you can buy polymer clay in all sorts of different colors, we're just going to be working with probably the most common colors that you can find, white or terracotta. When you first purchase polymer clays, it's probably going to look something like this. It's going to look like a brick, it's kind of separated by these different slabs of clay. And when you first get it, as you can see, it's kind of crumbly, it's brittle, it doesn't really like to bend so much as just break, but that's okay. Because what you're going to do is, as soon as you get your clay out of the package, you're going to rip off a tiny chunk of it, and you're going to do what's called conditioning the clay. And that's just massaging that clay and working it down until it becomes softer. And you're just going to keep moving this between your fingers. If you have a pasta machine that you don't care about, you could also use a pasta machine to run this through and it will do the same thing. But you'll notice that the more I work with this clay, the softer it becomes, the more flexible it becomes. You can see that I can stretch this clay without significant cracks appearing. It becomes a lot more malleable. In comparison, here's a fresh piece. Like, if we try and squish this down, you get cracks all through those edges. So just work that clay down until it becomes soft and malleable. Now, it's possible to make polymer clay creations with just clay and just your fingers. You can go in and sculpt out anything that you might need. I'm not sculpting anything in particular. Just wanted to kind of show the malleability of it. I don't know. Maybe you have a little figurine. And it's perfectly fine to create a work of art just using polymer clay like this. But creating works of art with polymer clay in this way has its limitations, in that normally you would be limited to working pretty small scale. Polymer clay will be flexible until it's subjected to heat. And when you are done with your project, you're actually going to bake it in order to create a nice hard surface that retains its shape. This is just a little gargoyle I made as a sample. But because of this quality of this clay not fully setting until it's been baked, this clay will actually remain usable for years. I would just suggest that whenever you are about to work with clay again, go in and condition it. Make it nice and soft so that it's actually usable, because over time it will become brittle and will want to crack on you. You'll notice I'm working on a baking sheet. The reason for that is because there are some oils in this clay. If you were to work on this clay on like a tabletop or like a piece of cardboard or paper or something, those oils will come out of the clay and get on whatever surface you're working on. I found that by working on a baking sheet, it makes cleanup a lot easier. And when it's actually time to bake your clay, you can just put it right on the same baking sheet and put it in the oven that way, and that also protects whatever you're going to be baking on. So, talked about how you can make a work of art just by using your fingers and the clay itself, and that can be a lot of fun. But if you want to make larger works of art, I would suggest building up the interior of whatever you're making with tinfoil. And the reason for that is because as you are baking this clay, that heat, if you're working with a thick piece of clay, that heat doesn't want to go all the way through it, and it's only going to want to bake the outside, and it won't be fully cured. So to reduce the amount of clay that you're using, and to allow that heat to sink through evenly, you can start with a form of tinfoil. Now, tinfoil at first is very, very flexible and bendy. Once you start to kind of crumple it down and push it tighter and tighter and tighter, it's going to become a lot harder to move. So I would suggest whatever form you're trying to make, start bigger, and then you can always compact it down to refine your shape. You don't need this shape to be perfect, and you'll see why in a moment. So let's just start crumpling it down. I don't know what I'm making just yet, but we'll find out. Okay, so this could be the base form of something like a cat or a fox, dog. We have our ears, we have the base where legs could go, we have the beginning of a torso. But as you can tell, it's certainly not the most detailed. And that's okay, because at this point, after you have your interior form created, what we are going to do now is we are going to take our clay, work it down until it's nice and soft, and then you can begin to lay that clay over top of the form that you've created out of tinfoil, which is exactly how I made this one. I would say 80 to 90% of this is tinfoil. It's just covered in a layer of clay. And what's nice about the tinfoil is because it's as textured as it is, it grips onto that clay really well. You really don't need to worry about that clay slipping off. But just keep on going. Work more clay down until it's nice and soft. Make a nice thin sheet out of it, and then you can lay it directly onto the surface. And you can continue to do this until this entire form is covered in clay. You can also build up different areas in order to make them more, thick. You can carve directly down into the clay in order to create texture. You can use clay tools such as this to smooth the seams between your layers of clay. If you wanted to add a piece of clay, like a projecting form coming off of the clay, and this is, we'll cover this area back here, and then we'll add something like a tail. When it comes to adding pieces of clay onto the piece that you are working with, say we sculpt out a tail, a short tail like this, it's not enough to just take the piece and push it on. At first, it looks like it'll stay, but if it's bumped or anything runs into it, that piece is going to fall right off. So if you look at the base, you can go around that outside perimeter, and sometimes clay tools are nice for this, but if you smooth the clay into the other clay, it's going to become a much more durable connection, and it's less likely to fall off. If you wanted to do a longer form, say you had like a long spindly tail coming off of this sculpture that you're making. Instead of just making it out of clay, I like to use armature wire. This is just aluminum wire. You could also use copper. You could use steel. I like using aluminum because it's soft. It's easily formed and shaped, and because it's soft, you're not going to struggle with it. You could use wire cutters to clip a piece off. You can use other shapes of pliers in order to shape and bend that wire. I like to go in with a sanding stick and clean up the end of that wire so it's not too pokey. But using armature wire, once you have your piece, cut off and smoothed out, you could take that wire and push it right into the aluminum foil, and that allows you to have long things extending off of your sculpture, like if you were sculpting hair or if you were sculpting long fingers or something that normally the clay wouldn't be able to support on its own, because if we roll out this clay very, very thin, it can't support itself. And so if you wanted something long and slender to project from whatever it is that you're sculpting, you will need to put something underneath. This is really the basics of working with Sculpey. Creating an underform, laying a layer of clay over top of it that can be detailed and then added onto. They sell polymer clay in all sorts of different colors. So if you wanted to, you could buy polymer clay in different colors and create your piece in the exact colors that you want, and you wouldn't have to worry about paint. If you don't have the colors that you need, acrylic paint works just fine. This was made out of white clay, and I just painted it to look like mossy stone. When it comes to the final details of your piece, we all have fingerprints, and this clay is so soft that if we push into it, you're probably not going to be able to see it on camera, but there will be fingerprints all over this piece. If you wanted a way to smooth those out and make sure that you don't have any fingerprints, cornstarch can be very helpful. Cornstarch is so fine that if you work it into your fingers, it will fill your fingerprints and create a perfectly smooth surface that you can then use to polish the clay. If you are working with clay that's a little bit dry and you need to make it soft again, like if it's been years and you haven't worked with this clay, a little bit of mineral oil, just a single drop worked into that clay, can make it soft again. Once you're completely done, everything has been smoothed out, everything has been textured the way that you want it to, and you can use all sorts of things to texture. You can use clay tools. I did most of the texturing on this with a paper clip. Really anything will work. But once your sculpture is completely done, everything is smoothed out, everything is textured the way that you want it to, all of the pieces of clay have been attached the way that you want, it's now time to bake. In order to bake your Sculpey creations, your best bet is to set your kitchen oven to 270 degrees, and you'll have to kind of remember how thick you put the clay on, because for every 1/4 inch of thickness, you want to bake this clay for 15 minutes. From what I've found, for most projects, about 30 to 40 minutes is usually about right. After 30 to 40 minutes at 270 degrees, your projects should come out nice and hard. They will be hot when they first come out, so make sure that you let them cool down, just like you would with anything else that comes out of the oven. But once it is cool, then you can paint your piece, you could leave it as is, and it will stay like this forever. It's important to note that polymer clays are not recommended to be, like if you're making bowls or plates or cups, it's recommended that you don't eat out of them. So I would try to mostly stick to figurines, sculptures. If you are making bowls, maybe make something to hold something that's not food, maybe like a jewelry bowl. But have fun with it. This is a really great product. Everyone that I've taught, how to work with polymer clay, they've fallen in love with it. Our classes have a great time with it. And I hope that you're going to have fun with it too. Best thing that you can do to start working with this clay is just dive right in and start playing with it. Figure out what that clay can do, figure out its limitations, and find out what it is that you want to make. And before you know it, you're going to end up with, fun little pieces like this. Thank you for watching this video. It means an awful lot that you are joining us and that you enjoy what we do here. I hope that you have an amazing day, and we will see you next time. Thank you.